Unless you've been living under a rock for the past 6 months, you're probably very much aware of the massive truckload of cash that Hollywood is currently losing. Indiana Jones, The Fall Guy, and Furiosa are 3 of the biggest. In fact, the last film on that list is doing so poorly they've decided to cancel all future Mad Max movies. So, no Mel Gibson comeback then, eh?
It's a embarrassment to me. You look like a on heat, and if you get raped by a pack, it's your fault. All right?
Maybe that's for the best. There seems to be a debate as to why movies are flopping over and over again. Streaming, it seems, is getting the blame. Noisy cinemas are getting the blame.
Excuse me.
Movie pirating is also being blamed.
Not sure I deserve that.
Hell, they're even blaming this poor innocent mouse. It seems everyone, thing, and force majeure is being blamed bar one thing. The movies themselves. Now, I'm no mathematical genius, but my spidey sense is telling me that if people stop buying Pepsi, the problem might be, wait for it, Pepsi. Now, call me mad.
You're mad.
But if I no longer like something because it's consistently hurt me, I'm going to eventually leave it. So the big question is, how did this problem start? Well, I've pinpointed 3 key movies that have effectively killed movies. And the results may surprise you, especially the last movie. So stick around to the end and also hit the subscribe button and hit the like button to help this channel grow. For the first movie, let's go back to 1986. The 80s was the decade where Hollywood began to merge chart-topping pop music with blockbuster movies. And in some instances, creating songs just for movies.
Who you gonna call? I can't hear you.
But more than anything, they were throwing high concepts to the wall. And this guy and this guy were the kingmakers.
Feel the need for speed.
Before Top Gun, making a blockbuster movie was more of a wave a stick around in a cave mentality. After the box office disaster that was Heaven's Gate, studios were less sold on getting auteur directors to bring them success, and more sold on the idea of fast food filmmaking. Top Gun is when the formula came together perfectly. Hot young cast, commercial director, top-selling soundtrack, American jingoism, and a storyline that is so incredibly paper-thin, it pleases the masses. The stars aligned. The box office said, yes please, and the film made stars out of its leads, Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer. It turned Joe Bruckheimer and Don Simpson into Hollywood's biggest producers and changed forever the framework of Hollywood. They now had a formula to work to, and that formula exists even today. 12 of the 20 top grossing movies of all time use the exact same formula. And when the word formula starts entering an art form, you invariably have an issue.
Who you gonna call? Hi, I'm Ray Parker Jr., writer and performer of the Academy Award nominated hit single Ghostbusters from the major motion picture Ghostbusters. But that's just one song. I've written so many other major motion picture theme songs and submitted them throughout the years. Now, they're available and together for one specially priced compilation. Songs like You Tried to Play the Game, but it's driving you insane. Jumanji.
Which leads us to 1999 and the next movie, The Phantom Menace. It's unquestionable. 1999 is the best year for movies ever. But one movie tips the balance slightly. 16 years after the last Star Wars movie, we were treated to a return of the Skywalker story with this.
Surviving our role.
Excuse me.
But putting the quality of the movie aside for a second,
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
the movie's true crime is its use of the prequel narrative. Now let's get this straight. Prequels were nothing new. The Godfather 2 famously told the backstory of Vito Corleone whilst also telling the front story of Michael Corleone. But this was Star Wars. At the time, fans were paying to watch films like Wing Commander just so they could get a first look at the new trailer for Phantom Menace.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
That's how big the movie was. Upon its release, it instantly became the second highest grossing movie of all time. The cultural exposure was vast. Prequel became a buzzword. And what is a prequel? Well, a prequel in Hollywood terms is how something became the thing it became. Ultimately, the idea behind a prequel really means that you've run out of story going forwards, so let's make a buck or two going backwards. The movie being a huge success validated the idea of the prequel, and soon after, most movies were following the same formula. These are the highest grossing prequels ever. Only one of them predates The Phantom Menace. And guess who produced and wrote it?
Sold them. I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and
This year, 2024, 90% of the blockbuster movies coming out are all prequels. And it seems like people are no longer responding to prequels as they used to, as this year's box office will attest to. Prequels are the cheapest and least creative way to keep a cash cow going. Of all massive movies in production and pre-production, prequels are the dominant force and are about to get a rude awakening when audiences don't turn up. And John Travolta brings us to our last movie that killed movies. But before we get there, do hit that like button, subscribe, and why not become a patron for exclusive videos and to be credited in all videos we make on this channel. So think about the year 1994. Now think about the film Pulp Fiction. Now think about life before Pulp Fiction and life after Pulp Fiction. There's no doubt that the film had an enormous cultural and creative impact in the world and in Hollywood. Suddenly indie movies were not just super cool, but now hugely important. Every director and studio was trying their hardest to make the next Pulp Fiction, and this went on for a decade and beyond. Every film was being dubbed the next Pulp Fiction, every director was being dubbed the next Tarantino. And what was lost amongst this era were more diverse movies. Movies that played in a different ballpark. Studios during this time were all banking on creating their next Tarantino. And this went on for a while until they realized they simply couldn't. And by the time this happened, that was it. We were now in this new era of reboots, remakes, prequels. Another key movie that shaped this was Fast 5. The Fast and Furious franchise was failing until they made this movie, putting together a bunch of hot young actors and The Rock, a commercial director, a top-selling soundtrack, and boom. Sounds similar to anything else?
Feel the need for speed.
And so now studios had every excuse to make part 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on of their franchises. And what we're left with now is a tired audience who've been beat up so badly by studios' flagrant care for their interests. Kids growing up with Netflix and Instagram and TikTok, so used to swiping to the next shiny thing on their screen, and all within seconds. So a 2-hour movie is like being castrated.
We gotta get his balls.
And of course, YouTube has replaced mainstream TV for casual viewers. So where do we go from here? That's the big question. And an uncomfortable conversation that it seems no one is willing to have.
Down in the basement, what's going on? It's people. There's a kid and a Nazi down there.
Order now to receive your free copy of Bobby Sings the Twos, theme songs to sequels that were never made.